And we are live, coming to you here on day 2 of the NFL legal tampering period on TD Sports Live. I'm Tom. I got Dan on the phone. We're going for the day 2 free agency special. We got a special one for you today, ladies and gentlemen. We're coming to you with the 16 teams in the AFC. We're going to go through all the signings. We're going to discuss them and let you know what we think. Let's get things rolling. Starting off here, we're looking at the AFC South. 4 teams, the Titans, the Jaguars, the Texans, and the Colts. Last year, division sent 2 teams to the playoffs, in the Titans and the Colts. They also have 2 teams picking in the bottom 5 of the NFL draft. However, the Texans have already traded away their picks, so those will be with Miami. To get things going here, the Titans, two signings. First, Bud Dupree. Outside linebacker coming over from the Pittsburgh Steelers. I believe he's around 28 years old. He's going to be rushing the passer. Last year they had brought in Clowney at the end of free agency, beginning of the offseason. They were able to bring him in, and things just didn't work out. Paid up relatively large to get Dupree into the building. 5 years, $82.5 million. To complement him, they also brought in defensive end Denico Autry coming over from the Indianapolis Colts. Another sizable deal, 3 years, $21.5 million, about 7 per. After losing multiple guys on the offensive side of the ball, including Corey Davis and Jonnu Smith, to relatively large free agent deals to the AFC East, we'll see what they do to round out that offense. Dan, how are you looking at the Titans and what they've done so far in this tampering period?
Well, I think that the pass rush was definitely one of the biggest weaknesses that they had on their team as of last season. They did try to address it a year ago, bringing in Jadeveon Clowney on a $13 million deal, as well as Vic Beasley on a 1-year deal for about $9.5 million. So if you take those 2 guys combined at the $22.5 million number, you're actually saving a bit by replacing them with Dupree. Now, neither guy in the Titans defense was able to provide a solid complement to Harold Landry, who they took in the 2nd round in 2018. So they're hoping that Bud Dupree can fit in here and do so. The concerns I do have with Dupree are the lack of production that he's had in the NFL. He's never been a major threat to lead the league in sacks, which is what you would expect when you pay a guy 5 years and $82.5 million. And the fact that he's coming off of a torn ACL, will he be ready by week 1? How's that knee going to hold up for a long-term 5-year contract? And the fact that he was playing on the opposite side of TJ Watt and Cameron Hayward. So in a defense where he wasn't the main focus, he was able to produce relatively well. He had a 77.7 PFF grade in 2019, but he failed to top over a 62.6 grade in any other campaign in his 6-year career. So this is an upside type signing. Clearly a great athlete, phenomenal size, can get after the passer. Just for the price that they paid, we haven't seen that production on the field as of yet.
They've used some high draft picks on that defense in the last couple of years. Obviously, last year they went with a tackle, which was a complete miss, but I think of some of the names, Evans coming out of Alabama, so they have some pieces down there.
Absolutely. They have Jeffrey Simmons that they can build around. And the fact that they added Denico Autry, who's been a productive player within the Colts defense, for 3 years, $22 million, only 9 guaranteed. I think that's a much better value signing. I would give Autry a B+, and I would give Dupree a signing of a C-.
All right, moving on to the Jacksonville Jaguars here. The one thing I'd like to point out about the Jags, not only are they picking number 1 overall in the draft, so they'll have their pick of the litter there, Trevor Lawrence probably, but they have not really lost anybody in free agency. So what we're looking at here is 7 players that they were able to add to help build up that roster. Somewhere in the ballpark of about $50 million total is what they've spent. We've had offense and defense. I'd like to sit here and start with the offense. So with Trevor Lawrence coming in, you bring in Phil Dorsett to play some wide receiver, as well as Jamal Agnew, who I look at as more of a return specialist. But if you can play some gadget plays with him, that could be a nice little wrinkle in that offense. Also, they brought in Carlos Hyde to play secondary running back after a great rookie year from Robinson.
Also, hot off the press, the Jaguars did come to terms with Marvin Jones Jr.
Ooh,
So it
that's a
looks
big
like
name right there.
Absolutely. They added him for 2 years, 14.5 million. An excellent value signing right there. And I believe Agnew will be used in the backfield a bit as well as the slot, but is a premier former All-Pro return man. So they did pay a little bit high on Agnew, but what he can bring to Urban Meyer, he's going to have a lot of versatility in that offense as well as being a premier return man.
And with that signing, Marvin Jones Jr., you're going to pair him up with DJ Chark, and all of a sudden that wide receiver core down there in Jacksonville is looking pretty good.
Well,
they had a late round last year coming out, I believe, the 6th round from the University of Texas. Could you tell me a little bit more about his progression over his rookie campaign?
Colin Johnson came along quite well. He was injured in camp, but he does flash as a deep threat, so he'll fit right in with Trevor Lawrence. And they also added Laviska Shenault Jr. last year in the 2nd round, a Cordero Patterson type who can help in the slot, help in the return game. So they have a boatload of weapons there at their disposal, and this could reinvigorate the potential DJ Chark rumors that we had heard yesterday.
And for those that have not heard, DJ Chark potentially a trade candidate over to the Baltimore Ravens for Orlando Brown Jr. to come in and really steady that offensive line at left tackle. That'd be a big one. When that falls, we'll absolutely let you know.
Absolutely. As far as the addition of Carlos Hyde, this is a guy with experience and also came out of Ohio State, where Urban Meyer has a great deal of success coming from. So he's very familiar with the player, very familiar with the personality, and you're bringing in Hyde to just add depth to that James Robinson backfield that was a complete success last year as an undrafted free agent.
The other part I like about Carlos Hyde is pass protection. A bigger guy, able to sit there, and if Robinson is out or you have any issues with that, you do have somebody that can sit there and help to protect your franchise with that #1 overall pick at Trevor Lawrence.
Absolutely. No, he makes sense as far as a depth signing, and the fact that it's only $4 million guaranteed, you can get out after the first year without any dead cap.
On the defensive side of the ball here, the thing that I look at is the commitment to trying to build up that secondary. They did bring Ray Robertson Harrison from at the defensive tackle position, but what we see here are multiple signings in that secondary. Shaquille Griffin coming over from the Seahawks. To me, he's the #1. I probably had him as my top corner available in free agency. So I think that's a pretty cost-effective deal there at 3 for $40. I know it sounds a little bit high, but you can let him go play against #1s, and I think he'll be able to compete.
Yeah, I think that signing sets them up beautifully in the secondary. They took C.J. Henderson top 10 a year ago with his increased development along with Shaquille Griffin. They're locked down at the outside positions pretty well here moving forward. We could see them address a slot corner and that nickel position in the draft, but this signing was one of the better bargain deals, and I'm actually surprised that Seattle didn't try to keep him for that number. At the same token, I was a little surprised at what they paid for Rayshawn Jenkins, a 4-year, $35 million deal for the former safety out of the University of Miami. He had his best season as of last year, but when you're looking at a 4-year, $35 million deal, and the top safety on the market, John Johnson, went 3 for 33 to the Cleveland Browns, you have to think that the value isn't quite there.
What I've seen there is about $16 million in guaranteed. So you're looking at potentially a 2-year deal, and they'll be able to get out from underneath that if things aren't working out.
And they did bring back another former Jaguar on the defensive line in Tyson Alualu. He was a former top 10 pick in 2010, but at the time he was in Jacksonville, they were a bit of a struggling team, and they're back in those graces again after the 1-year run with Saxonville. But Alualu went to Pittsburgh, and he's had the best 2 seasons of his career in 2019 and 2020, going from an 80.1 Pro Football Focus grade in 2019 to a career high 89.6 in 2020 as he played more on the nose in Pittsburgh. So he is 34 years old, but getting him at 2 years, $6 million, I think that's one of the better signings that they've made or that we've seen this entire free agent period.
I think right now the Jags have set themselves up in the draft and continuing through free agency to really focus on solidifying the offensive and defensive fronts with teams in the division like the Titans and the Colts with Jonathan Taylor in that offensive line. And then you get Derrick Henry in Tennessee. I think that'll be next on Urban Meyer's list with either those seconds, thirds, fourth round picks to really bring in some guys who could play some physical football and help control that line of scrimmage.
And they also kept Dwayne Smoot, 2 years, $14 million, and they're hoping to get a lot more production out of him and Taven Bryan, a former first-round pick. Obviously, they brought in some competition on that line, but they have made some investments in the past, so we'll see how that group comes into the mix moving forward.
All right, moving on here, we're going to move on to the Houston Texans. So as I previously mentioned here, the Texans will not have a first or second round pick. They've traded swaps in the 4th, 5th, and 6th round picks with the New England Patriots for Marcus Cannon. So not a lot of draft capital, and they did not enter free agency with a ton of money. So it's been interesting to see what they've done here. The first move I'd like to point out is the Tyrod Taylor signing. With the Watson situation, at least they've set themselves up. If they do have a holdout, they have somebody in there that they can fill in at that quarterback position.
Absolutely. Taylor is a base salary of $6 million with incentives to take him up to 12.5. So that's an insurance policy if Watson is moved or decides to hold out. I think will be a holdout. I don't see them trading him. However, Taylor is a similar style player that would fit right in seamlessly if, obviously not at that level. But the Texans aren't going to be a team that's contending this season anyways. So they at least have a quarterback in that similar market who has playoff experience.
So we have a pretty good list of players here that the Texans have signed. Pointing out here, Christian Kirksey is the highest paid out of this group at $4.5 million on a 1-year deal. For the players that they brought in, most of these guys are on the 1-year deals. 1 or 2 of them might be on a 2-year deal at about $2 million a year. Is there anybody here on this list that really stands out to you?
Not necessarily. I thought the one guy that they did add that might have an impact would be bring in Shaq Lawson for Benardrick McKinney. Lawson is going to be an edge rusher. They're going to be losing a lot of that with J.J. Watt out. So I think they're going to be expecting quite a bit from him. Beyond that, Mark Ingram, he could be a solid goal line type back, short yardage if they want to mix it up with David Johnson, who has wide receiver experience coming out of college. And Andre Roberts, who's a very good return man. He has a 92.1 PFF kick return grade over the past 3 seasons, which is second to only Cordero Patterson, and an 86 punt return grade, which is second only to Nyheim Hines. So what the Texans are doing right now is putting themselves in a position to have a veteran roster that isn't going to contribute to any dead cap beyond this one season. So this is going to be a bridge year to set them up for future success into the 22 season and beyond.
I completely agree with that. I think right now they're looking to reset that cap. I think they're trying to be as competitive as they can, have the young talent that they get into the building, try to learn from some veterans, continue to play hard. I hate to say it to you, Houston fans, but I think you're going to be looking at a top 2 or 3 pick come next year's NFL draft. The only blessing or the best part about that is you finally get your picks back. Moving on here, the last team in the AFC South is the Indianapolis Colts. They have not made a splash in free agency, which is a little bit of a surprise because they did have a good amount of money. The big notable offseason move here from the Colts would be the Carson Wentz deal. They did use a good amount of change to go get him from the Eagles, but they will be a player in the days to come. So as they start to make some moves, we will keep you posted.
Yeah, the Colts have all types of flexibility. They have told T.Y. Hilton they'd like him to go out into free agency and before he signs anywhere, give them the opportunity to match. They're in a great position to go after one of these receivers that's lingering on the board, such as a Will Fuller, a Kenny Golladay. They do have that cap flexibility, and with that being a bit of a question mark, considering only Michael Pittman and Paris Campbell are the talent that you have there, I think they're going to be looking to add one of those big pieces to help Wentz in his first year in a transition year with Frank Reich.
All right, we're going to shift gears here. moving over to the AFC West, a lot less transactions getting made as far as bringing people in. We've seen some of these teams lose a good amount in free agency. We're going to go ahead and start off with the Denver Broncos. They've added two pieces to the defense, cornerback Ronald Darby and defensive tackle Shelby Harris, both around $10 million a year. Harris coming in a scooch under at about $9 million a year.
Harris is one of my favorite players in this entire free agent class. Denver ponied up, gave him the $15 million guarantee to keep him in Denver, but he's had 4 consecutive grades of 75 or higher, and he ranks 10th in the NFL among interior defenders. With what they paid him, he's in the 23rd range for highest paid interior defender. So I thought this was a fantastic value in keeping him and allowing him to eat up blockers in the middle to allow Bradley Chubb and hopefully Von Miller's healthy to rush from the outside.
The Broncos have a very young roster here, a lot of skill positions over the last several years. I wouldn't expect any more big splashes really coming from them. We'll see where they go in the draft, if Drew Lock is their guy moving forward, or if they try to position themselves to get one of these young quarterbacks coming out.
They've put a lot of resources into the offensive side of the ball. So I think adding Darby was definitely a great value. 3 years, $30 million, 19.5 guaranteed. He's just 27 years old. He's been on the up and up. And obviously he was a starter for a playoff team this past year with the Washington football team. So he brings that experience to team up with Bryce Callahan. And I think they could also add a slot corner in the draft, like a Tyson Campbell or an Asante Samuel Jr.
So the next team we have up is the Kansas City Chiefs, the AFC West champions, the AFC champions, Super Bowl losers. Coming off the Super Bowl, there was a lot of talk about their 2 tackles and the impact it had, not having them against the Tampa Bay Bucks. And what we see as leading into free agency was both of their starting tackles getting cut. Move that I don't think too many people saw coming, but they found themselves in a little bit of a cap pinch. They've been able to rework a couple contracts and free up some money here. And then they went out and got themselves arguably the top guard on the market in Joe Thuney. 5 years, $80 million. Looking at value, to me, after cutting both tackles, I found it very difficult for them to go pay Thuney that much money.
I completely agree. Thuney's a heck of a guard. It's just the value of the guard position.
I personally wouldn't be surprised if they're trying to shift him to a tackle position. He is a very versatile player, but to me, that's just a very, very expensive guard.
It definitely is. So depending on how they fill out this roster the rest of the offseason and draft, Thuney does have the flexibility to play on either side, left guard, right guard, and he does have some tackle experience. So this was one that is a bit confusing to me. The Chiefs go and add their 7th player on their roster that makes $15 million or more, which is highest in the NFL. We all look at the Rams with a strange look, considering that they've really added that high-end talent of $15 million players plus, and they only have 6 of them. And we've seen how tight that can get. So Kansas City moving forward, Thuney did only put $6.5 million into his first year with the Chiefs. So it does give them flexibility to continue to maneuver and tweak a little bit here. But moving forward, this is a bit of a question mark. I just don't find the value there for a guard, especially when they have the holes that they have at tackle. So I think this is a step back for the Chiefs, to be completely honest.
I think it's the start. I think the Chiefs are one of those teams that are really hoping for that cap number to explode with a new TV deal moving forward with some of those guys they have locked up long term.
That's the way it looks, and like they're all in for this one season for sure.
Moving over to the Chargers, last year, one of the surprises was the quarterback of the Chargers. We had Tyrod Taylor, who was set to start the year until a needle punctured his lung on a bad injection. And that might have been the best thing that happened to the Chargers all year long.
Well, I do have fresh breaking news that the doctor that did apply that shot to Tyrod Taylor's brother had Justin Herbert in his fantasy team. So,
Justin Herbert was just who I was getting to.
But no, Herbert, as soon as he came in, he looked like he should have been the starter from day one. In fact, he made a case for himself that he could have been the first player off the entire board with Joe Burrow, and definitely is going to have the Washington football team wondering if they should have taken Justin Herbert at 2.
The other piece here that's interesting with the Chargers is a full coaching staff change. So they have coaches coming over from the other side of LA, from the Rams coaching staff.
Absolutely. Young coach Brandon Staley, highly sought after considering his connections to Sean McVay. He'll be joining Justin Herbert, probably the most talented quarterback in this last year's class. And it should be a nice upgrade moving forward. So what the Chargers did is really address the offensive line. Now, they did release guard Trey Turner, who they had traded for this past offseason. So that was a bit of a loss, but they did add Corey Linsley to a 5-year, $62.5 million deal. How do you think Linsley is going to fit in there?
You know, when I think about this, I think the center is one of the most underpaid positions in the NFL. You look at Joe Tooney there, 5 for 80, compared to Corey Linsley at 5 for 62. This is an all-pro, a first-team all-pro that we're looking at here, an anchor to an offensive line, and you're really allowing Herbert to set his feet, step up in the pocket, and work the ball down the field with that big arm. I love the signing.
What I also like about this signing is they're pairing Linsley back up with right tackle Brian Bulaga. Obviously, Bulaga has had a great career thus far, and he was a solid player last year for the Chargers and helped recruit Linsley. But obviously, they've had great success pass blocking, and the Chargers are hoping that continues to translate for them. The Chargers also went ahead and added Matt Filer, a guard for 3 years, $21 million. He's played some right tackle, which was in 2019 after switching to left guard this past year. What do you think of that signing at $7 million per?
I personally, it's a little steep, but I think that you're able to do it because you do have that quarterback. Seeing what Herbert's salary is from the rookie pay scale, I think that helps out making that move. With the 3-year deal here, they're looking somewhere in the area of, I think it was 11 or 12 million guaranteed. So again, 1 or 2 years you're able to get out from the deal. And that will still be in the time that Herbert's contract is still in that rookie deal. So you still have a lot to work with. When that deal comes up for him to be re-signed, you're looking at him going from 6 to 7 million a year to somewhere in the ballpark of 30 to 40, like these other guys that we're seeing, the Prescotts, the Watsons, the Mahomes. So I think it's a good move here to bring him in and really try to protect him, keep him on his feet, and increase and elongate that development process.
What I really like about this signing is that they added 2 capable starters on that offensive line, and Filer has the ability to play outside, play inside. So when it comes around to their pick in this upcoming draft, they're not going to be forced, hey, we need to take this tackle. Depending on what the board dictates, they're now in a good position to take the best player available. Now, I do think they are going to address that tackle position. However, if they don't, Filer can slide outside, and at $7 million, that's a pretty good value as a starter. And if you do take a tackle, Filer can be a rather capable guard there. So I do like the versatility on that signing.
So 2 key major losses for the Chargers here: Hunter Henry and Rayshon Jenkins. One went to the Patriots, the other went to Jacksonville. From Hunter Henry's standpoint, what do they look at from the tight end position?
It's going to be interesting. They've had Virgil Green in the past, who coming over from Denver has been more of an inline blocker. I was a bit surprised that they didn't make an offer or franchise tag Hunter Henry. I thought he was a great fit with Justin Herbert. But clearly this is something that needs to be addressed, whether in the draft or free agency. I would even look at a potential target of a Cameron Brate too, or an O.J. Howard from Tampa Bay in a trade if nothing comes to fruition. Tampa has a logjam there at tight end. 3 excellent players, 5 on the roster total. All 5 played last year: Tanner Hudson, Anthony Auclair. So you have to think between the cap number that Tampa has there, with Braid at $6.5 million. He might become available. And I look at Braid as kind of a poor man's Hunter Henry. So I think that would be a nice fit there. But I was a bit surprised at that one.
All right. So the last team we have here in the AFC West was the Oakland Raiders, just on the outside of the playoffs last year. Oakland has taken a step back here at the beginning of the season. They begun by trading away Trent Brown. They've also lost Nelson Aguilar, Devontae Booker coming out of that backfield. Tack McKinley, who wasn't a real impact player, got him later in the season. And then Tyrell Williams, again, who wasn't a real impact player. I would say the contracts that they did have, that Mayock has been giving out, have been relatively bad. I think it's been a struggle over there in Oakland. I think they've struggled to identify talent. I think they got this one right. I think Ngakoue, as a high motor guy, I think he has the ability to produce sacks and make a difference there on the edge. So I do like this signing 2 for 26. I think that's one that will work out for the Raiders, pairing him with some of those younger defensive linemen that they've taken over the last couple of years.
I think this was a phenomenal signing. I give this one an A. Ngakoue is one of the highest graded pass rushers in the league. He's been effective rushing off the edge since he came into the league. Over the past 4 years, he has an 88.7 pass rushing grade, which is 12th best in the league out of all players. And the only thing that he needs to work on is his run defense. He's a specialist. He's in the position where you want him to come off the edge and wreak havoc against quarterbacks. So at 2 years, $26 million, you compare that to a Bud Dupree 5 for 82.5. I think the Raiders got this one right, which is saying something considering that they've cut most of the free agents that they've picked up in big signings the past few years. Similar to how I feel the Patriots are going to be based on this free agent class. So we'll see what the Raiders do. They have a lot of flexibility moving forward. As we know, Derek Carr is a movable contract. Whether they keep him and he's the future quarterback, that remains to be seen. But we're going to see a lot of movement from the Raiders because everything they've done has somewhat fallen flat on its face in the Mayock tenure. So at some point, to keep their jobs, they're going to have to scramble and change
the other one is you have Mariota sitting there, $11 million they could free up at the drop of a dime. So it'd be interesting to see how some of these wideouts that haven't come off the board yet work out. If that's something that they're looking at, trying to replace that Tyrell Williams spot and the Nelson Aguilar.
That's what surprised me a bit as well was keeping Mariota and trading Trent Brown. I would have had an opposite philosophy. I would have kept Trent Brown and looked to move Mariota.
So again, a lot of pieces kind of moving out of the AFC West. I would say the Chargers had the strongest pickups so far to this point. Arguably, the Broncos did well for themselves on that defense. I think the Chiefs made a splash with Tooney, but they did lose a lot. So not a lot going on in the AFC West as far as bringing people in, but some big names going out there.
The Chiefs continue to lead the pack with the Chargers trying to close in.
That's for sure. Next up, we have the AFC North. The AFC North has the Baltimore Ravens, the Cincinnati Bengals, the Cleveland Browns, and the Pittsburgh Steelers. Last year, sending multiple teams to the playoffs and having the Bengals with the number 1 overall pick in last year's draft taking Joe Burrow. So a lot of very good football teams and up-and-coming football teams coming out of this division. One of the best divisions in football, in my opinion.
Absolutely one of the best divisions in football, and you got to love what the Ravens have done for the past 20 years, to be honest with you. They've really played the compensatory pick game very, very well, and we're seeing that again this year. By letting Judon walk, they got a 4th-round compensation pick, and they decided to re-sign Tyus Bowser, 4 years, $22 million. So they saved about $35 million for a similar outside edge rusher while collecting a 4th-round pick. And then the other signing they had in Kevin Zeitler won't count against the compensation pick because he was released prior to free agency.
The other one to speak of for the comp pick is Yannick Ngakoue, who we were just speaking of. He was originally traded to the Vikings, and then they were able to get him from the Vikings mid-season. And by him walking away as a Raven, that will make them eligible for that pick as well.
Absolutely. So in a way, that pick paid for Ngakoue to play half a season and compete for a championship with them. So they're really masters at playing that game. And both these signings are very good value signings. Zeitler, consistently one of the best pass protecting interior linemen in the league. And with Orlando Brown's trade request, if you don't have a solid tackle right off the bat and you need to fill in a stopgap player or rookie, you at least have an excellent guard there next to him.
So next up, we have the Cincinnati Bengals. A couple of years ago, I believe 4 years ago, they had taken John Ross top 10. He will be the main free agent leaving. And when I say main free agent, by name only, because he did not contribute much over his tenure there in Cincinnati. They really focused here on the defensive side of the ball. When you look at the roster, it was clear that they needed help at the cornerback position. Bring in Mike Hilton and Awuzie from the Cowboys. Two helpful pieces. I'm not sure it has enough to get them over the hump. I still would think that they look to add additional secondary in the draft here. But ultimately, it's a start, and you got to start somewhere, right?
Absolutely. I love the Mike Hilton signing. They took Hilton right from a division rival, Pittsburgh Steelers. Hilton's played inside. He's played outside. He's ranked as a top 30 cornerback since being an undrafted free agent in 2017 based on wins above replacement. And as a slot player, you're looking at 4 for 24, which is the same that Jalen Mills got, and Hilton's a much better player. Hilton has a lot of versatility, also as one of the best blitzing defensive backs in the league. He's had over 43 quarterback pressures since 2017. And at age 27, the sky's the limit. I think this was an excellent value.
So the one we haven't spoke of yet is Trey Hendrickson coming over from the New Orleans Saints. So that Saints team last year had a loaded defense. They had pressure coming from the inside. They had great secondary play. And Trey he flourished. He put up big-time sack numbers, got after the passer. With that being said, how much was Trey? How much was the team around him? The ability to cover, the ability to get that interior rush. How does that translate now to the Cincinnati Bengals and what they'll ask him to do moving forward?
This is a bit of a confusing signing to me. I like Trey Hendrickson quite a bit, but they're kind of replacing him, or they're using him to replace a player that's a little better at what he does. So I think retaining Carl Lawson, who signed with the Jets, would have been the better play, especially since he's 25 and got 3 years compared to the 4 years, $60 million that Hendrickson got. But we did see a breakout year from Hendrickson last year in his 4th year. So coming out of Florida Atlantic, he was excellent in college as a pass rusher, as he had a 90-plus pass rushing grade in his junior and senior seasons. However, he was basically in relative anonymity for his first 3 years. And then this past year, he broke out with 13.5 sacks, 11 QB hits, and 25 hurries. So steep price for a guy that really only showed 1 year of production. I guess they can support the signing by looking back at his college numbers and seeing that development. He is an excellent player. But just to move off of Lawson to go pay a similar type player was a bit confusing to me.
I completely agree. I have to wonder if Lawson wanted to stay, if he was hell-bent on getting out.
And, you know, that's a good point because they did move on from Dunlap, who was a longtime teammate and a longtime Bengal. And we're seeing the same thing as far as Chidobe Awuzie coming in to replace William Jackson. So kind of a changing of the personality and a changing of the guard. So if they had some guys like A.J. Green, who's most likely not going to be back, they might be looking to get an entirely new culture in Cincinnati.
So next up, we have the Cleveland Browns. Main move here was John Johnson coming over from the Rams. 3 years, $34 million, about 11 per. To me, this is a big-time signing. I really like this one.
Absolutely. 26 years old, Johnson had an 85.3 PFF grade in 2020. He's had 3 of his 4 years with a grade over 80. So to have him at 11 million per, well, I mean, we had him number 5 as our 5th best free agent in the entire class. So an absolute bargain here for the Browns. And it just shows you what happens to a team like the Los Angeles Rams when they do go out and overpay. all of their players or trade for players, that you lose some of your homegrown talent that's really not even an exorbitant price tag. 3-year, $33 million for a guy like John Johnson's an excellent value, and this is one that the Rams are going to be kicking themselves about.
The Browns also signed Tack McKinley. He'll be a rotational defensive end here, 1 year, $4.25 million. So not a bad move. Former first-round pick. We'll see if what type of upside he can bring, but low risk, high reward type of guy.
Excellent rotational edge rusher. That's a great signing.
And finally, here for the Steelers, they've been in cap hell. Losing guys like Juju Smith-Schuster. When you look at their roster and you see Ben Roethlisberger right now with a over $40 million cap number, no surprise to me that the Steelers are not doing much. What they did do, trying to replace Mike Hilton, they brought in Cameron Sutton, 2 years, $9 million.
Yeah, they're losing quite a bit in Pittsburgh, unfortunately, between the loss of Pouncey, Villanueva's a free agent, Bud Dupree, Tyson Alualu. They're really strapped for cash. They were able to retain Cameron Sutton when they lost Mike Hilton. We have seen the rumors of Joe Hayden being released, although he's still under contract. Sutton at 2 years, $9 million. Excellent signing. He's had an 84.2 PFF grade from the slot. You just don't want him on the outside, so if they're relying on him playing outside, he's going to be exposed. In the slot, he's a capable starter, and at that price tag, they did all they could with this one.
Yeah, this is a team going backwards. I think this is a team that needs to reset that cap. I hate to say it, but looking directly at Ben Roethlisberger, he's a great player, great quarterback, but it might be time to look to start moving on from him. You can't be looking at a $40 million cap hit with the way he played coming down the stretch.
I think the only reason that they brought Ben back is because they're 1 year away from having the cap space to rebuild, and they saw how ugly and bad it was with their player development without him. So they got him at a reduced number, and now they're going to hope for the best for one season, and then you're going to look at a full rebuild in Pittsburgh.
All right, moving on, we got our last division, the AFC. The AFC East. Starting with the Buffalo Bills here, having a real big tampering period. They have not done anything. They've lost two guys here, Andre Roberts, who we talked about to Houston, and Ty Nishke. The right tackle, not a big piece. Thinking about what the Bills have done, they were able to free up enough room to sign Matt Milano. They cut guys like John Brown to be able to free up some of that money, but they're looking at just trying to keep the band together as much as possible, add a couple pieces in the draft, see if they can get any cheap contracts, and make a run for it again. Another late postseason push.
Absolutely. They just kept all whatever they could out of their guys. They kept Darrell Williams, a right tackle, 3 years, $24 million. That was an excellent value. He had a career high 79.2 grade this past season, and they were also able to retain guard John Feliciano. So Feliciano had a rough year last year. They definitely missed Wyatt Teller, who they moved on from, who was an all-pro for the Browns. But at 3 years, $17 million, they're hoping Feliciano can get back on track.
The next two teams that we have, the Miami Dolphins and the New York Jets, a little bit different situation than most teams are used to in the NFL. They're both picking in the top 5. They both have additional first-round picks. And then they both have high second-round picks. In the Dolphins' case, they have additional second-round picks. So 4 in the top, around 50 picks or so. Miami, at this point, they had a backup that they've signed today to play with Tua. And that's going to be Jacoby Brissett, 1 year, $7.5 million, as Fitzpatrick has moved on to the Washington football team. My favorite team name in the game. I don't think anything's better than the team. They've also added a big-time punter. So that really speaks to what the Dolphins have been able to accomplish here in this tampering period.
Yeah, I think this was a nice signing, bringing in Brissett. He has some previous experience with head coach Brian Flores. Of course, Flores was on the defensive side of the ball, but being in the same room, they know each other. And that just provides insurance in case Tua struggles, Tua has injuries, or if they decide to package Tua in a potential Deshaun Watson or Russell Wilson trade, they will have that backup quarterback in place without having to reach in the draft for it.
I think at this point, the Dolphins are really looking forward to that draft. Stay tuned for our draft specials. They're going to be great. A lot of player information coming from those. So keep an eye out. Next team here is the New York Jets. Again, another team with a bunch of draft capital. I really like what the Jets are doing here in this free agency period. And I don't say that too much about the New York Jets. But I think they've added 3 solid players here, trying to help out their young quarterback, whether it's Sam Darnold or they get one in the draft, bring in Corey Davis, big physical wideout. This guy was a top 5 pick not too many years ago. 3 years, $37.5 million. About 12, a little bit over 12.5 per. To me, looking at what they had last year with Jamison Crowder only playing a handful of games, it was a signing that they needed to make. They have a lot of money to spend, and I think they targeted a very good wide receiver there with room to continue to grow.
I agree completely. Davis had his best season of his career this past year, an 85.3 grade, which was 10th out of 127 qualifying receivers. I was thinking that Davis was going to get more in the 15 million per range, considering his athleticism, where he was drafted in the past. He has been a productive playoff receiver. Getting him at 3 years, 37.5 million. This was a fantastic value for the Jets. Finally get Sam Darnold a little help on the outside. This was a signing that I think any team like the New England Patriots, after seeing this number come out, has to be regretting paying Nelson Aguilar the similar per year value. On top of that, they added Carl Lawson, who was 6th in the NFL last year in pressures with 64.
So I know this is a guy you love.
I absolutely love Carl Lawson.
What makes him special to you?
What makes him special is that he's 96th percentile among all edge defenders in pass rushing grade on true passing sets. So on passing downs, 3rd and long, 3rd and 10, since entering the league in 2017, he's only behind Joey Bosa, Cameron Wake, Myles Garrett, and Von Miller. So you're adding a guy with huge potential. His college grades were exactly the same. He absolutely dominated one-on-one to get after the quarterback. He's only 25 years old, and at 3 years, $45 million, my guess is that this won't be the biggest deal that he gets in his career. I think you're going to see another big contract in 3 years from now because he's going to be a 10-plus sack guy.
And finally here, Jared Davis, I know we briefly spoke to him, linebacker, inside linebacker. To me, this kid flies around, coming over from the Detroit Lions. To me, he's a Mack truck in the middle. He likes to hit you, and he's pretty decent coverage.
Yeah, he's a good speedster. The only problem with Davis thus far is his best attribute has been his blitzing, and that's not necessarily what you're looking for from the middle linebacking position. But he was in a tough situation in Detroit. This is a former first-round pick, and this gives the Jets now the flexibility to potentially move on from C.J. Mosley, who hasn't exactly panned out as far as a free agency signing, and Davis with Robert Saleh can hopefully be similar to a Quan Alexander, Fred Warner, using his speed in the middle of that defense to really make plays happen.
And again, just want to point out here, again, another team with a lot of draft capital, ability to go up or down, multiple rounds here. You're looking at them picking at number 2. Is there a quarterback that they're in love with? Are they going to move Darnold for additional capital? Are they going to be able to move back and retain Darnold? Just a bunch of decisions here coming up for the Jets. Plenty of different options for them. I think they're in a pretty decent spot right here. A better spot than they've been in the past handful of seasons.
They're definitely in the driver's seat. And the fact that Robert Saleh is in control, and this is how the first 2 days of free agency have gone for them, you have to be feeling a lot more confident than you had been under previous regimes. We will have to see what direction they go from here, but at least they have a capable receiving core at this point. They could still add to it, but Denzel Mims, Corey Davis, Jamison Crowder, Christopher Herndon, they at least have a couple capable weapons, which without, even Davis there on the outside.
They still have a lot of money to spend. They could bring in another one of these big names at wideout as well. They have the ability to move on from Jamison Crowder and save about $10 million. If you can bring in a Kenny Golladay at $15 million, you save the 10 there. That's something they could be looking at as well.
Absolutely, and even if you move on from a Crowder, you can bring in a Juju Smith-Schuster into the slot. There's T.Y. Hilton on the outside. The Jets, with these moves, they haven't been too aggressive, and where they have spent, they've spent wisely. So they've done a great job so far.
So finally, we're going to finish up here with the Patriots. Not going to go into too much detail. We put out a Patriots special yesterday as day one free agency. They were the ones making the splash. The two people I would like to point out, Hunter Henry signed up today, a second tight end at $12.5 million per year, and another defensive end here, 300-pounder, Henry Anderson, coming over from the Jets, 2 years, $7 million. How do you think those moves complement what we talked about yesterday?
Well, I'll get into Henry Anderson first. Bringing in him at 2 years, $7 million. I think we addressed that yesterday on our video. If you haven't seen it, go check it out. It is posted. We did talk about the lack of depth that they have on the defensive line, and in adding Matt Judon as an edge rusher, they still didn't address beyond Godchow who they're going to have in the trenches. So adding Henry Anderson, he's a better run defender than a pass defender. So you're going to have another guy with Godchow that's probably going to be your rotational first and second down, stuff the run type guy, eat up blockers. And then you're going to have your specialist like a Dietrich Wise, who they re-signed as well yesterday, replacing guys like Anderson on the pass rushing situations.
So one last thing here before we go into Hunter Henry. We talked about the Ravens getting compensation picks. That's been something the Patriots have prided themselves on for years. With all of these signings, this will be the first time in as long as I can remember when push comes to shove and they start handing them out, the Patriots will not be receiving anything for a guy like Joe Thuney.
And that's going to be tough with their recipe because they haven't been the most accurate with their draft picks. However, since they have whiffed on quite a few, I think that's made it that much more pressing to go out and bring in actual NFL talent.
Yeah, so the final piece here is Hunter Henry. Bringing him in 3 year, $37.5 million. Again, we talked about Jonnu Smith, that $12.5 million AAV, placing him as the third highest paid tight end in the league. So now you have a tie right there, the third and fourth highest tight ends in the league. About 60 catches, 600 yards last year as a career high. I see Corey Davis at that $12.5 million a year number. I see what the Patriots have done. I think that I might like some other guys that have gotten paid in free agency over paying Hunter Henry after you've already paid Jonnu Smith.
Well, I think we all woke up this morning, and when we saw the Hunter Henry news, we were scratching our heads. To have close to $30 million in cap allocated to that tight end position seems a bit redundant. However, we do know the focus that the Patriots have had on that tight end position ever since Bill Belichick took the helm. So whether it was taking Daniel Graham first round and following that up with Ben Watson in the first round, paying Gronkowski and Aaron Hernandez, or taking Dalton Keene and Devin Asiasi, trading up for both just a year ago, they have had a big focus on tight end. And I did have Hunter Henry as my best available free agent tight end, so I do like the signing. However, I'm a bit confused since they had added Jonnu Smith at the same number just a day ago. So as far as Hunter Henry, the player, his first 2 years, he looked like he was a Rob Gronkowski, Travis Kelce type. He had an 88.9 PFF grade over that 2 year stretch, both catching and blocking. So he's a capable all-around tight end. But since he tore his ACL in 2018, he has taken a step back. So we're hoping that we get the first 2 years of Hunter Henry and continue to develop that rather than what's been there the last 2 years. He's still a good player. However, for the price tag that they gave him, they're going to be looking for that efficiency from his first couple of years.
Yeah, I think what they're looking at from an offense is to not let defenses key on a specific guy. Make the read, get the ball to the open guy, find the best matchup. A bunch of quality players. Nobody that I'd look at as a great player here, but you will have different weapons out there on the field. See how they utilize them and see how they fit together. The last thing about the Patriots I'd like to discuss real quick is moving forward. You have Stefan Gilmore with a questionable contract cash number. So the $15 million cap hit is not what he'll be receiving in actual money. So I think that's one thing to look at. And then with all the spending, the second guy will be interesting to see is J.C. Jackson. So I think you got two potential pieces there, as well as the quarterback position moving forward. Is Cam the long-term answer, or do they start to look to see if they can add another quarterback or potentially through the draft?
Yeah, it's going to be interesting to see what they do. They're kind of in between a full rebuild or simply going with a reload. So those players that are on the last year of their deal or heading into their early to mid 30s with their contracts coming up, those are the types of players that they're going to have to internally question, are we a contender now? What direction are we heading in? Or do we turn these players that are going to leave for nothing into assets now so we can truly build from the bottom up and get this thing right? And as far as the tight ends, the last thing I will add is I do think Jonnu Smith is going to be used more in the short passing games, little flares, screens, even get some snaps out of the backfield. Whereas I think he'll be a gadget type tight end. Whereas I think Hunter Henry is going to be more your traditional play action, hit him on the seam, downfield, red zone. So I think you'll have a little bit of versatility even with those guys playing the same position as far as how they'll be utilized. It shouldn't be too redundant based on their skill sets, but like we said, it is a big commitment at that position.
So that's it, ladies and gentlemen. That's your AFC breakdown of day 2 free agency, the tampering period. We'll be back with the NFC side. Look out for it. I'm Tom.
And I'm
Dan. TD Live.
TD Live. Thank you.
TD Live. TD Live.
TD Live. TD Live.
TD
Prestige.
Live.
Worldwide. Prestige.